Most guitar players have a disconnect between their lead playing and their rhythm playing. When they want to play chords, they go into rhythm mode, and then when they want to play a solo, they go into lead mode. In this video, I'm going to show you how to flow between these two modes and start adding riffs and licks between your chord changes. As always, the fretboard diagrams in this lesson will be oriented to match my fretboard in the video. If you do want the flip diagrams, those will be available over on my Patreon. And if you like the videos I make here on YouTube and want to help support what I do here, make sure you go check out my full-length guitar course, Listen and Play, where I'll teach you how to find the chords to any song by ear. Links to all of this stuff and more will be at the top of the description. All right, so if you've seen this video over here, then you're gonna be perfectly equipped to do just about everything we're gonna learn in this lesson. But if you haven't, I'll go over this stuff really quickly right now. So the main tool that we are gonna be using to combine our lead and our rhythm playing is something I call the chord roadmaps. And all these are major scales stretched horizontally across the low strings of the guitar. And we do this so that we have all the root notes for our bar chords to be able to play in any key and not have to learn any new shapes. So for example, the chord roadmap for the key of G major would look like this. We'd start on a G note down here, and we'd play G, which is number 1, A, which is number 2, B, 3, C, 4, D, number 5, E, number 6, and then F sharp, which is number 7. Now, each of these notes serves as the root note for our regular bar chords, the ones that look like that. There's the minor version. And those are the ones that are rooted on the A string. And to know which of these chords are gonna be majored and which are gonna be minor, we use something called the major-minor formula, which tells us that chords 1, 4, and 5 are gonna be major, 2, 3, and 6 are gonna be minor, and then that 7th chord is going to be diminished. So if we just apply that formula to the numbers of the note in this G major scale for the key of G major, that would mean that our G, our C, and our D are all going to be major chords, and then our A, our B, and our E are all going to be minor chords, and then F sharp is going to be a diminished chord. So we'll apply our basic bar chord shapes to all of those notes. G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, E minor, and then that F sharp diminished. Don't worry if you don't know the diminished shape already. It's not super important, especially for what we're gonna be learning today. All right, so that's gonna be chord roadmap number 1, and we can shift that up and down the fretboard to play in any key. The problem is once you get up to maybe like the 10th fret or even the 8th fret, it starts to get a little bit awkward to play these bar chords, right? So what we have to do is we have to look at a second chord roadmap, and this one has the initial root note of the first chord in this key on the A string. So for example, if I start on this note right here, that is a D note, I can also create a chord roadmap from that. And for that, we have to do something a little bit different. And instead of going up to the next string when we get to the 4th note, we go down to the lower E string. So it looks like this. D is 1, E is 2, F sharp is 3, and then we go down to the low E string here for 4, G is 4, A is 5, B is 6, and then we get C sharp right here for our 7. Once again, we apply that major-minor formula, 1, 4, 5 major, 2, 3, 6 minor, 7 diminished, and we apply our regular bar chords. So we get D major for 1, E minor for 2, F sharp minor for 3, G major for 4, A major for 5, B minor for 6, and then we get this C sharp diminished for our 7. All right, so these chord roadmaps that we are looking at are not only giving us the chords we are allowed to play in these keys, they're also giving us the notes that we're allowed to play in these keys. And what we're gonna be doing here is something that's very similar to the way that I would teach improvisation in general, right, when you're soloing. So what I will usually do is I will say, okay, we're gonna put on a track, and as each chord comes along, you're going to hit the root note of that chord, and then you are gonna play 1 or 2 or however many notes from the corresponding major scale that aren't that chord tone, and then you are going to land on the root note of the next chord as it comes along. We're gonna do something very similar here. The only thing we're adding is that we have an actual chord that we are landing on. So for example, if we stay in the key of D major here, right? If I have a chord progression and let's say it's going from a G major to a B minor, we're gonna go nice and slow here, to a D major, to an A major. Well, what I'm gonna do is as I land on each chord, I'm gonna play that chord, right? Imagine the band is all landing on the chord together. Okay, now I know that before I go to the next chord, which is going to be the B minor, which is my 6th chord in this key, I can play any of these allowable notes from the key that are in my roadmap. And it might feel a little awkward at first because you're moving horizontally, but the idea is eventually over time, you actually can use them to flow from one chord to the other. So we could do something like this. Right? So all I did was added those notes from the chord roadmap and then landed on that B minor chord. And then it's time to go to the next chord, right? To go to that D, so let's M here. It's gonna feel very, very random at first, and that is the whole point. You can play any of these notes. But that is kind of like our starting point before we start breaking out into vertical scales, because basically we can just be thinking about one thing, right? We're playing rhythm guitar, we're using bar chords, we're using the chord roadmaps. All we have to think about is instead of thinking, I gotta go play this scale and this scale, I'm still just thinking about the chord roadmaps. And instead of thinking about them all as individual chords, I'm thinking about them as notes. Right now, we only have one of each note inside this key of D major, but we can actually add some repeated notes as well so that it's a little bit more comfortable and we know that we can go to some other spots as well. So right here below the 1, we still have our 7, right? That's the same as that. Then we can go even lower, all the way down here, and we have our 6. That B note is right there and there. So for example, if you are down here on that 4 chord and you want to hit that B note, you don't have to go up here if you want. You can just go. You can play those right there. We'll also add 2 more notes here, and those ones are all the way up on the 10th fret here. So when we go 1, 2, 3, we're usually going 4 to the G down there. We can actually also play an octave of that G, which is also the 4, all the way up here on the 10th fret. And right below that, we actually have our 1, right? Because this would be 7, 1, 7, 1. Okay, now let's quickly add some notes to the first chord roadmap. Remember, I know there's a lot of stuff going on here, but you can get these diagrams over on Patreon if that's gonna be easier for you, or feel free to screenshot them if you like this orientation more. So for this chord roadmap, I'm actually gonna shift from G up, everything up 2 frets to the key of A major, just because it's gonna give us a little bit more room. And what we can do is we can add some stuff below our 1 right here. So we can go 1, 7, 6, all the way down there. Okay, we can also go 4, 3, 2, all down there. And not only is this gonna be useful for playing those in-between notes, but sometimes too, if you wanna play the 6th chord, you might not wanna play it all the way up there. Now you can also play it with a different bar chord shape, that minor 6. Okay, so that's it for the extended roadmaps. Remember that it doesn't matter what key you want to play in. These chord roadmaps are gonna stay the same structurally, and obviously the numbers for each chord are gonna remain the same. You're just shifting this roadmap up or down the fretboard. So let's dig a little bit more into the actual application of this whole idea. To reiterate, basically what you wanna do is you want to land on a chord with the band, then you wanna fill the in-between space. Instead of just strumming on that same chord, you wanna play random notes from the chord roadmap, and then when the next chord comes along, you wanna land on that chord and then fall back into those random notes from the chord roadmap again, and you just kind of keep doing that, etc., as you're going through the chord progression. So let's take a chord progression that is very, very standard, what we would call a 1, 5, 6, 4, and we're gonna do this in the key of D major. This one's nice just because everything's very central on the fretboard. So if I play a D major, which is the 1 chord, to an A major, which is the 5 chord, to a B minor, which is the 6 chord, to a G major, which is the 4 chord. I don't want you to worry about doing this to a metronome or track yet. All I want you to think about is those are my chords, and I know what my chord roadmap says I'm allowed to play in between. So let's go to that first chord, and then you need to play a random note. I'm gonna do this one, and then I'm gonna go to the next chord. Okay, now my next chord is gonna go up there, so I wanna play another note, but I'm gonna play that one down there before landing back on my next chord. Now my last chord is this one down here. Let's try doing 2 notes. Okay, it's probably not sounding too musical yet, but what I want you to do is kind of cycle through this a few times at least. Play through this chord progression and play 1, maybe 2 notes in between. Once you kind of start to get the hang of it, you can add a little bit of rhythm to it so that there's some consistency. So what we're gonna do next is we're gonna throw on a jam track and we're gonna do this along to actual music. Now I don't expect you to be able to do all of this immediately, but I kind of want to show you a real world example, so I'll kind of talk through it as we go. Okay, so I already know the chord progression of this song. It's gonna go from an F major to an A minor to a C major to a G major. This is in the key of A minor or C major. So I'm gonna play those chords. In between, I'm going to use my chord roadmap to play 1 random note. It's a little bit boring at this point, right? But that's okay. Right, as I get more comfortable, I can add some more notes. And then it moves into a different chord progression in this particular jam track. This chord progression is D minor to C major, A minor to G major, same key, C major / A minor, and we're just using different chords from that key. We can do the same thing, random note in between. Some are gonna sound better than others, that's fine. The idea is to just get you moving. And at this point, you're only obviously adding the notes in between. It's gonna sound a little bare bones, that's totally fine. But as you get more comfortable, you are gonna be able to incorporate some of the other things that you learned maybe from my other lessons. One of those things, which I'm gonna talk about after this jam track, which is adding the minor pentatonic scale to this. But just to give you a quick idea along to the track of what it might sound like, back to the verse progression here. So that track right there is one of the tracks from my slow pop jam track pack, which you can download totally free. There'll be a link somewhere at the top of the description if you do want to try it. Now, the next thing that you can do here is you can start breaking out into vertical scales. The great thing about these chord roadmaps is that they are literally attached to the basic minor pentatonic scale shape that I love to show everybody. I usually call it the home base because it's a great spot to always fall back on if you ever get lost or anything like that. So let's start with the chord roadmap for the key of D major because we've been using that key a lot, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then we've got our extra notes that we've added on. Well, there's a reason I wanted to add these notes up here. The reason for that is because right here is our regular minor pentatonic scale shape. That means when you are playing a chord progression in this key, let me actually just grab a pick here. If I'm playing a chord progression in this key, and I land on that 6th chord, I'm right in the perfect position to just rip a little pentatonic lick. I'll also show you where that minor pentatonic scale shape attaches with the other chord roadmap as well. So let's go to the key of A major. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And the reason I wanted to show you the notes behind this shape is because that is where that minor pentatonic scale shape lives. All right, so as far as what you should watch next, I actually have the perfect lesson. It's literally a follow-up to everything that we worked on here today. It is a little bit more on the upper intermediate side, so be on the lookout for that. If you want to check it out, I will have it linked up in the middle of the screen for you now. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.